And so it made me during that time question a lot about, man, if this is it, right? Like, am I proud of what I've built? Am I proud? What is important to me? Because if you said business wise, are you proud? Well, all the accolades, all the trophies said, yep, right? The money I was earning said, yep. But when we talked about what was important to me and the relationships and the people and why I worked, like that was missing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur, or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Very excited for this week's guest, Cathy Christen. Cathy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited for this discussion. I was just reading through all the things you've done, and including a lot of ups, but some downs and some figuring things out, I think, too, that we'll get into. But before we get into that, Cathy, sales and entrepreneurship trainer, executive business coach, speaker, co-founder, and owner of GoAbundance Women's Mastermind Group. Division manager of Cutco, which is a great organization to learn sales and marketing things. So that experience, real estate investor and mom, and author of the book Life as a Masterpiece, which I really want to talk about that and get into that, and kind of how we design that. But before we do, Cathy, why don't you tell me just what's your story? Who are you, and kind of what shaped who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, I was super blessed to grow up in a house full of love, but very low income. So early on, I knew I wanted to get out of that, and fast forward to today, it's pretty awesome to see my siblings and I have kind of cut the generational poverty, where they're all millionaires, which is really neat. But we grew up, yeah, lower income. I knew I wanted to own things when I saw people have time freedom. Time freedom became very prevalent when I was 14. I wanted my parents at all the things. I wanted my mom at my recitals, and they always had to work, right? And then I saw friends' parents who were always there, or we went to their house and they were home in the afternoon before 5, and that was completely foreign to me. And I remember asking, like, how were they home? And they said, well, they have their own business. And I was like, I will own my own business. So that became very, ingrained at 14. Fast forward to college, I bumped into Cutco as I was studying accounting to have a foundation in business and any business, knowing how to run the numbers. But I bumped into Cutco and really learned the power of goal setting came from Cutco for me. Like being able to even set a goal for that summer, sales goal, savings goal, putting together a plan to get it done. It was the first time I had seen, like, hey, I want to go after this thing. Sounds kind of crazy. What's it going to take? Putting a plan together. And then committing to the actions and not just hitting it, but really blowing that goal out of the water. And I was hooked, Phil. Like once that happened, I was like, oh, wow. Like, so I can really think about, because until that point, the only thing I dreamed about was what I didn't want to be, right? I was running
Yeah,
away from poverty. And I was like, I don't want to be
interesting.
poor. I don't want to be this. I don't want to be that. But I don't know that until that point, I had really thought about what I wanted, like specific things that I wanted. And as I met with my mentor, he's like, so what are you working towards? Oh, I want money. And he was like, well, for what? I'm like, for what do you mean? For anything? He's like, well, give me like, what are you excited about right now? And that's so important, for business owners, when you're managing others, like knowing like, what are they working towards? Because it really ties the effort and the actions that they put into day to day to something bigger, right? So now instead of just making sales calls, and it's like, oh, I don't like making calls, or I'm just making calls. No, it's like I'm taking one step, two step, three step, right closer to London, and it was tied to something bigger.
So I want to first Cutco. I've heard so much about Cutco. I know you referenced before. You had met Hal Elrod, who wrote the foreword for your book. He was at Cutco, and just how much you can learn. So it sounds like growing up, age 14, you made this decision. You were entrepreneurial. You were going to own your own business, but you went to Cutco, which was you were an employee there, although it was a very entrepreneurial role, I think, in sales. But I tell people when you do have a job, or if you're working, whatever you're doing, have the mindset, what can I do here? What can I learn here? How do I grow? Which, you can't connect the dots forward. You don't know what that will lead to, but
Right.
learn as much as you can in the role that you're in. And it sounded like you took advantage of that opportunity at Cutco.
Oh, absolutely. And at Cutco, you're 1099. So it's like learning your first little
Yeah.
business, learning write-offs, learning the perks, right, that the government gives to business owners.
Yeah.
So really neat to see that. And then they have a entrepreneurial internship where you can basically run your own franchise for the summer. So I got to do that in 2003. And I think my world was forever changed there as well. I loved leading. I loved having a team. I loved being able to impact the masses. I knew that whatever I was doing, like I wanted to have a higher role. Like I wanted to be in an ownership role, a place where I could have influence and impact, on people, but also have a support team, and I think initially the first couple years, as most business owners and type A and top performers take too much ownership, right? And you're like, you can't let go of the reins. I'm going to do
Yeah.
everything myself. I do it better than everyone, right? Or I don't know, Phil, if you've heard someone say, well, it's just faster for me to do it, right? Like than to sit down and try to train someone. It's just faster, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's like such short-sighted thinking because
It
yes,
is.
faster in the second, but it doesn't allow you to scale and it doesn't allow you to have freedom later when people can be doing that same task over and over and you don't have to worry about it, right?
All right.
Uh,
Now you're getting me excited. So I want to get into that. I have, before we go into leadership and team building and influence and all those things you said, because this is going to be fun. I want to go back to money and money for what. You talked about clarity. It actually reminds me, and not just, it actually ties to the leadership and team building discussion because first you have to get clear on what you want, your purpose for what you're doing, what your work is. And
mhm,
it sounded like you went through that process. And then you also, though, we have to give this to our employees. We have to help them gain clarity as to what they're doing and why they're doing it if we really want them to be bought in and engaged, because there's such a high percentage of employees in the US, like the numbers are staggering on how many employees aren't engaged in
right.
what they do.
They
So,
quit and stay, right? They quit and stay, which is the
right.
worst thing you can have in your organization.
So how did you go through that process first for yourself? Why, like really getting clarity on the why money or why you wanted to be an owner, why you wanted to, do what you do, but also then how do we translate that into our employees?
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So first off, something that kind of grew organically from a mentor I had, and he didn't call, and then I ended up, forming this as like a way I did things later in my business. I called it the three whys test. And when he'd ask, okay, what are you working for? Like, why are you working? Oh, I'm working for, like, and why is that important to you? And finding that out. And why does that matter? Because when you get to that, that's where you get to the good stuff. And they're like, well, growing up, I had this, and you hear about the chip on their shoulder or whatever it is that's really motivating to them, or what's driving that more surfacey decision. The fact is that we as humans speak in a lot of cliche and surfacey language, right?
Yep.
And people ask
Very much
about
so.
things, and it's just like very like over the top. And so, as a great leader, it's like digging in to really find out like what motivates this person, like what really gets them going. And when they're feeling stuck or unmotivated, something that I can, that carrot I can dangle and remind them of, like, like hey, they're like, oh, I just don't want to do this right now. I'm like, all right, cool. So is family to Disney World out the window? They're like, no, 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 and like, cause I knew that for that woman, that was like her thing, which wanted to take her kids to Disney, right? Where this person was trying to buy a house. This person wanted to do a family trip to Europe. And so knowing things that excite them, doing dreams lists. And I don't know if you've met Dane Espegard, great friend of mine from Cutco as well, and Hal and, Justin Donald, but he has, and I have a version of this, one of the chapters in my book is this, because Dane and I were at the same event actually in 2007. So I had completely hit a wall. My business was doing phenomenal, broken every record for the company's history. And by August, we still had 4 months and I wanted to quit. I earned more money in a year than I ever even thought possible. And I was like, if this is success, I don't want it. I'm tired, I'm burnt out, I'm unhealthy. I have become a workaholic who's pushed away people that I love. And this was not the plan that I
Right.
thought, this was not the dream that I had, to be isolated and all the people that I love not really loving me so much, like loving me, but not liking me so much, right? And like has stopped inviting me to things, or just, how their perception of me. And I thought about, man, if I passed away right now, what would people say? Oh,
Yeah.
Cathy was a workaholic. She didn't care, all this. And I was like, it was the opposite. Because I worked so hard because I wanted to provide great experiences for my family, for my friends, and, live a different type of life. But They didn't get that. But I just remember at that point sitting going, wow, like my siblings are upset with me. I've lost touch with these good friends. And I was just sitting alone, all this success, getting all these congratulations from our company and thinking like, what have I done? Right? Like I have totally alienated people that were so dear to me. And I went, I that fall, I took some time off and just like went on a little mini sabbatical to really think about where I was, like, where do I want to go? I was at a crossroads, right? And I think that many times in our lives, we get to this point where it's like, should I go this way? Should I go that way? Right? Or we're just maybe not ignited the same way with what we were
Yeah.
doing. And it's in those moments, I think it's even more important, right? Like obviously, and with GoBundance, like we can do a lot of preventative maintenance to that in terms of we do our quarterly goals, we do our map, we're constantly getting clear on our vision. But I didn't have that back then, right?
Yeah.
And as I sat there, I was like, man, a mentor of mine said, you have to get clear on what you want. I'm like, I don't know. He's like, well, just take some time to just
Yeah.
journal and write and think. And 5 years from now, right? Or 10 years from now, pick a number. Like, what do I want life to look like? Right.
Yeah.
And then working back to go, okay, what could 1 year from now? Like we're toasting a year from now. And I'm like, Phil, I did this and I got this done and I got that done. And I remember early on it, 24 years old, 25, having a mentor tell me, just go journal about that and think about like,
Yeah.
what do you want it to look like? And it really came down to like, there's no way I can scale my business any larger, like with how I'm working. There are no more hours in the day for me to work. And at that time I was one of those young entrepreneurs, like, I'm going to do it. I'll do it better myself, and it was January of 2008. I remember I was checking into the Bellagio in Vegas, and Justin Donald, the lifestyle investor, is checking in next to us, and he was also, in Cutco back then. And he looked over at me, and he was all tan, and he looked so like full of life. And Phil, I was like pale. I looked like a corpse. I was so tired. And he
That's what it's like in Ohio, by the way. That's how we feel in Ohio, just so you know. So
Yeah,
that's
and
okay.
he just looked over and he said, "Hey, congratulations. Like you have become the best manager in our company's history." He said, "Keep it up. You're going to burn yourself to the ground." And
Oh wow.
inside, I was like, "Oh, I already am there." But my pride was like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
and
so just a lot first a lot there. I want to recap some of that
yeah.
because one thing is sometimes I think we have to get to that point of almost burnout to recognize what we're missing when we bring ourselves to that point. Like I wonder if for you, do you feel like you had to get there? Did you have to go through that to recognize where you're at versus if it was just, just if it was just okay, would have you really
Yeah.
had this recognition? Like the lows can help us really find the highs or what we really want. And I think this process helped you take some time off and go through the why process. Like, why? Is it money? Well, if it's money, but it's against everything else and not in support of everything else, that you're not living life in alignment, right? If it's money for the sake of money and things, that isn't going to be the answer, right? Money can support things, but if it's just for money to get things, that's going to be empty. And I think it became more about time, relationships, some of the other things you talked about. So
Mhm.
I want to maybe answer that question. Like, do you feel like you had to go through that process to learn
I think for
this?
myself and many top achievers, pride and ego's in the way, and so you get slammed to the ground. And so for me, I think that yes, it was necessary, for me to hit that wall, for me to actually have a quote unquote checkup from the neck up and say, wait a second, like again, if I'm gone tomorrow, and unfortunately I had experienced, my cousin had just passed away the year before, who was my best friend, same age, 23 years old, gone in 2006.
Wow.
And so it made me during that time question a lot about, man, if this is it, right? Like, am I proud of what I've built? Am I proud? What is important to me? Because if you
Right.
said business wise, are you proud? Well, all the accolades, all the trophies said, yep, right? The money I was earning said, yep. But when we talked about what was important to me and the relationships and the people and why I worked, like that was missing, right?
Yeah.
And so I really do think I had to go through that. And then there was one phrase that my mentor just said, and he said, you need to stop taking pride and be the best at everything because you're not. And that was another ego check. And he said, you're not the best developer of other people. He's like, why don't you start taking pride and being the best teacher of things? That'll
Yeah.
change your life.
Yeah. The other thing is when you're in this, you talked about just so many of our relationships and even how we think a lot of times can be surface level. And then you talked about journaling, writing, and thinking. And I like the what I've reframed is, I want to read, I want to consume, I want to listen to as many podcasts I can, and those things are good. Please keep listening, but spending time journaling, writing, thinking, praying, whatever it is for you, look at those as ways to educate yourself on, like, those are different forms of education where you're just sitting with yourself after you've consumed. And if you do that, you're going to learn more about what you just read, and you're going to learn way more about yourself and get way beyond just the surface level kind of thinking. And over time, you'll get out of your surface level discuss. This will bring you out, you more comfortable, and get you out of just these surface level conversations that honestly society encourages because we're afraid. We're afraid of what's below the surface. I think we're afraid of what's below the surface. So if I bring it to now as business leaders and trying to set up, lead people, scale, build systems, build teams, I think a lot of people are also afraid to have these conversations with their employees. And if you're afraid to have these conversations, my opinion is employees are thinking about what they're thinking about. And for you to know that is only more information. And you want to help, like, you want to be in support, like, you want their work to be in alignment with what they want, not against it. And if they're working for you and it's against it, that is a problem. And you need to know about it and have these conversations beyond the surface. So let's talk
Oh,
about
so well put.
let's
Yes.
talk about leadership, building teams, and really the shift I think you made in this time period where you were completely burnt out because you were doing, and not leading, to paraphrase it. Tell me about kind of how the evolution of that happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So after that time of just really thinking about where I want to be, it's like, okay, let me take on this challenge of how can I be the best developer of people? I'm going to try that on. And so that was 2008. I was going to try that on. And it started with really taking a look at what did I want my organizational structure to look like? What did I want my business? How many people actually were going to report to me as the owner, right? Because I had been working as an operator, and the goal was to actually be an owner, not a full-time operator. I wanted to work on the business, not in the business, right? That's the transition I needed to make, was to have more time to work on the business and through people. And so it took some time there to go, okay, let's say it's 10 years from now and I have my company that I own. How many people are reporting to me? How many departments do we have? How many support members do they have in each department, the heads, and looking at that, and then taking time to identify, okay, what type of attributes do I need this person to have? And I think this is important for everybody to look at in their businesses, because you are a certain type of personality. And sometimes the right-hand person you have, it's best when there's certain overlap that's similar, but they also have different skill sets than you, and they help right?
Yeah.
And so that's going to be different for everybody. For me, I'm very like, when I start working, I get real serious and I'm like, let's go make shit happen, and I'm very intense. And so I need somebody who gets stuff done, but is funny, because they like make me laugh and they make me slow down. And if they weren't around, I'd just be like, let's go, So knowing like, what do you need? If you're a little bit too loosey-goosey, you might need someone that has the, velvet hammer, but can be good with the team, right?
Is there a system or like framework for personality profiles that you use or you prefer that has worked for you?
I do. And I think that it was created internally to our company, but it's
Okay.
available to anybody, because I have friends who use it in their like all sorts of different companies. Like one of them, like they have maintenance workers and they use this, but it's called CVI, Core Values Index.
Okay.
It's more than a personality test, because it really goes into like your values and understanding like how you process, how you learn, and how you execute, and how you really like to be managed. And so it's so easy, it's so digestible, and once you understand it, you can read the book Core Values Index. Oh my gosh, you can identify people just by how they ask questions, how they go about things. It's pretty neat.
And
So
I
that
would just say, independent of the tool, right? So I think core values index, look into that, but also independent of the tool, for you to understand yourself, who you are, what your personality profile is, what your core values are, but the importance of understanding who you're hiring, the role, like, does the role match what they're going to be doing? Because I've hired people that are phenomenal people, but right people in the right seats is very, very important.
yes.
So personality plus, disc profiles, culture index, those are some other ones that you could look into. Again, core values index that Cathy referenced here. But just getting to know yourself, your own personality, and core values in addition to your employees is going to help, because you can't hire yourself over and over again. That would be if I hired a lot of me, that would be bad news. We don't want that. We want people that have different strengths, to fill the gaps that we inevitably are going to have as leaders. So
Yeah, and Phil, that's so important. I want to make sure everyone listens to that because you can have the right person in the wrong seat and you kill them and it's not productive for your organization and you're losing money. And I think about just being conscious of who people are, what their strengths are, and putting them in the right roles. And if you have someone, and I'll say this because I've had people say, "Oh, but this person was just incredible energy. Like I just felt so good when they were in my interview and I just put them into the spot I had, but it wasn't the right fit." Create a new spot. Like there was one year, I remember I created a CFO position. It was a chief fund officer, but it's what that business needed because it was direct sales, right? And the energy sometimes would get, with all the rejection or it would get down. And so they would help cheer people up, high fives, just random stuff. And they'd help with other things for culture and team bonding. But it was very necessary at that moment. So think about that as well. It might not be a chief fund officer, but looking at your business, if there's someone that you're like, wow, like they're just such a great energy and culture fit, it's okay to maybe create even a part-time position or full-time that you feel could really add value and give ROI to the company, to the
And
business.
I think if you have a process like this in place when you hire, you're still going to make mistakes, but you're going to learn, through those mistakes, through having a process, through having discussions with these people about really what their personality and core values are over time, you're going to learn more and you're going to get better and better at hiring and
Oh,
putting
heck yeah.
people right in the right seats, or you're going to move people around to get them in the right seats. So we talked about right people, right seats, understanding personality, culture, core values. What else? So we're getting good at hiring the right people and personalities, but what else do we have to do to become, as you say, an owner and not an operator?
Yeah. So, first it's getting the right people in. The next thing is training them properly. I think, Phil, a lot of people skip over this. They'll do a whatever, they go through their training process, whatever that may be. And a lot of times it's might be within a week or they're watching blank videos or they're shouting and it's very simple. And they think, okay, they're trained, they're good to go. And yes, some people might be more confident executing and they're good to start, but that's not going to develop people where you could just leave for a month or weeks and you can be gone and they're self-sufficient. If you really want to multiply yourself, to me, when I coach different executives and business owners, I tell them, I'm like, it's a month process. Like it's 1 week of them just shadowing you on everything you want them to do. Week 2 is you doing it together, letting them do some stuff, you do some stuff, and letting them build some confidence. Week 3, I let them do it on their own. I'm not there. But knowing week 4, I'm coming back to shadow them and give them feedback to make sure that they're doing it the way that I want to. And then I'm checking in at least quarterly, in some instances, even monthly, just to see how they're doing, and watch them. And if there are any areas of opportunity, looking at that part of the business and seeing how we can elevate. So I think that it does take some time, but it also frees you up for the long term because I had some of the highest retention, people that were with me year after year. I still have one of our coaches that's started with me in 2011. So, she's 14 years now, which is so neat. And that was going through that process and building that confidence. You're building relationships. The next step we talked about before was the goals, right? Knowing why are they working?
Yeah.
What are their big hopes and dreams? I remember, I think it was back in 2017, I went to Hal's Best Year Ever event. And when we were there, we actually went to, I think it was Organifi and their headquarters. I was so impressed, Phil. Like they had a wall with a tree and it had like all the different employees had a little something up there and it had their top 3 goals for the year. And so they were up on the
Nice.
wall and
Yeah.
people knew that. So like when they'd close a deal or an account or something, it was that high five. You're one step closer to that boom, whatever it was they were working towards, things that were
Yeah.
monetary goals, right? Some were travel, family things they want to do, but that whole knowing like, why are my guys working? Because your company should be a vehicle for them. All right.
Yeah.
For most people, your company is not the end. It's not what they
Oh
dreamed of
man,
their
I like
whole
that.
life. Right. But it can be an incredible vehicle to get them where they want to go faster, stronger, more equipped.
So, okay, first of all, company is a vehicle for them. Love that. Two other thoughts. One, I'm going to go back to training for just a second here. Return on time and return, like, so investors,
Oh,
business
we
owners.
skipped a very important part of that. Duplicatable systems and all your SOPs. So
So
part of
let's
that training.
let's come back to that. So return on training properly. If we think about ROI and return on time, return on investment, right? We want to invest in something and continuously get paid over time as much as we possibly can. Return on time, we'll go back to if we just do this ourselves, we can do it faster this time. But if we really spend the time up front and train properly, and I think this is really hard for small business owners to get right because it's just you're busy, you have a lot going on, especially if you're the entrepreneur, you're wearing all these different hats and like you have 20 other things to work on versus training someone that isn't isn't there yet, right? They don't understand it and they need to learn your systems and process and everything else. So I think just think about that as invest the time up front in people and it will pay back long term for you. And then the other thing, just the alignment of goals and understanding like there's a process to have your business goals and ensure that employees are aligned to those goals, right? Strategy deployment is a general term. There's all kinds of different books on that. Traction, 40X, 40, whatever there is, whatever, there's a bunch of them. But when you bring in, I think, personal goals into this as well. So like we have a level 10 meeting each week and everyone will talk about their quarterly rocks and they'll have 4 business rocks that align to our company goals, but then they'll have 2 or 3 personal rocks that they choose that they'll present and just update a status on. And the culture that it starts to build on how the team members get to know each other, what their challenges are, what their opportunities are, what they need help with, what you learn from someone else talking about what their goals are and seeing like, oh, I could do that too with, with my son or my daughter or my family or in my faith or in my health or whatever it might be. Just the bond you're building through that. Plus, as you said, you're now becoming a vehicle, your company is becoming a vehicle to help them, not just professionally and with money, but also personally in their most important areas of their life. I just love that a lot. So we missed duplicatable systems, though, which I do agree is very important. So we got people and culture and then
Yeah.
systems. So talk about duplicatable systems a little bit more.
Yes. And so this is something that, and I'm going to speak to any small business owners that maybe there's certain tasks that only you've been doing. Start documenting everything. And it's so simple now. AI is unreal, everything that can be done. But I think about even like Tango.us, I think it is, where if you're doing something on the computer, it'll screenshot and create instructions with pictures that now when you're training someone on how to do that, boom, you have a pamphlet ready to go. And you didn't have to take any time. Back in the day, I had to sit and I recorded people. I would watch the video. I would sit and type, rewind, sit and type so that I could be the best trainer. I could be the best at this. Now with AI, it's nuts at fingertips what we have, right?
If
And
you're, what, real quick, tangent, okay, then we'll come back to duplicatable systems, but AI, like we've been playing with this and like our goal is just, hey, start to use it more and more. And I've been using it like, hey, just review this email. Like, is it well written? And just keep trying different things. And you can have a conversation with somebody, AI, which is kind of scary, and ask anything, and it has an answer, right? I mean, it has an answer for everything. So, what we're gonna have to bring an AI like expert and do a deep dive into this topic and how we can apply it for business owners because it is mind blowing what it can do. And every time everyone's using it in so many different ways. I think for business owners, just start trying it if you're not trying it in any way and learn and just, even tap into networks of people that are using it, especially if it's in your industry. What else are you doing on just creating duplicatable systems?
So we've got everything you're doing, having your SOPs, having all that. But I think that the bigger thing in terms of creating great teams is, well, one, we have the right people, they're trained the right way, they have the proven systems and how you want it done, great. But now, do they actually, and the goals, the part of knowing where their goals are ties into the part that really helps with building the great teams and having retention and having people that care about the business as much or more than you. Because a problem that I see is business, oh, when I leave, business goes down. The goal is that when you leave, business goes up, right? And so what does that look like? Well, they have to care. And so do they feel cared for? And so that's why I think it's so important to know about them, but also in terms of culture for your team, do you have a family picnic, quarterly? Do you have something available for the spouses or the kids, different activities that help you grow closer to them? The companies that take time to do this, people feel like they're a part of something bigger. They feel like they're cared for as a person and not just as a number in the business.
Yep.
And so this encourages, without you even having to do it, better performance because they want to make you proud. They're so grateful for what you've done for them, for their family. I think about for those who have performance-based sales type companies, whether it's in real estate, whether it's in any kind of sales, and for your people, having metrics, having contests that include the families in the payoff potentially, right? And sometimes it's stuff just for them, but you also have a better buy-in from their spouses where they're like, I love this company. They do this for us, they do that. And it really creates a culture where people, they want to perform at a higher level. They're not just showing up and going through the motions,
Yeah.
right? And they don't quit on you and stay. When they're ready to go, it's because you've helped launch them into that next thing. And it's a beautiful goodbye. And they want to make sure that their spot is replaced with someone as capable or more than them. I can't tell you how many times myself and others that I've coached in their businesses have had people that transitioned, then say, Oh, I'm available if they have questions, like reach out to me. Like, I'm just so grateful for everything you did for me. And that's really, building that relationship with your people, to be able to have that, right?
Um, what are so just a quarterly event. So again, we're busy entrepreneurs, right? So I get that these things like they take time. They're so important. And I think the way to summarize this that you said so well is just how are they talking about like their work at home? What are they saying? What are your employees saying when they get home on a regular basis? And do they go home fulfilled and feeling like they're being purposeful with what they're working on, or are they feeling like it's just a job only and it's just for a paycheck? And there's a big difference. And then this whole goodbye subject, and I have not heard this phrase before, but the beautiful goodbye. I think there is such a limiting mindset around this that holds people back. And I come from the corporate background where the goodbye was like, okay, you know, what can we do to fight for them and get them back? And just always like, it a negative? Not that they didn't appreciate people, but making it a beautiful goodbye. And like, if my employees are really, really passionate about something else, right? What can I do to help them get to that point? They still have to do their job and get things done, but if they're really not passionate about it, let's set them up to go do what they're passionate about. And if you do that right, maybe that takes a year, 3 years, 10 years. They're going to train so many people and transition them and support
Oh,
you and
yeah.
always be an advocate for your business. So don't be so fearful of doing what's right for people. People, if they really know that you care about them and are trying to help them out, they're going to do so much better for you as well, because
Hmm.
they're their back. And then the last thing is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? I think it was John Maxwell that said that, and I love that quote. And you really just got to, if you show a sincere interest in them and supporting your team members, it's going to work out for you. So,
Yeah.
just a lot of good stuff there. So, how have we talked about your story and people, systems, goals, building the culture, all these different things. How did this turn out for kind of come back to your story? What does this look like now for you?
Yeah, well, it turned out pretty good. That year when we started training people, we broke the record we did before. The next year in 4 months, I started traveling about 7 months out of the year, just having a lot of freedom. I wasn't married until later at 35, so I had a lot of fun from 25 to 35, lots of freedom there. But then even getting a chance to, get married, to be able to really live life by design, to have the systems and teams that could run things. The last 5 years I'd been kind of behind the scenes since COVID. I had my first child and actually had 3 kids since COVID. And just being able to,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you, have the people that could run the business and drive the business without having to be there. It's amazing, and it's been so cool. I've now trained, I was going to say hundreds, I think we're in the thousands now over the last 20 years to really design and scale businesses that are built around them having the time to live a life they love. And that's
Yeah.
probably what I'm most proud of. Like, I love watching people that came from nothing, them seeing what was possible, the transitions they've had, and the impact. One of our young guys was Forbes top 30 under 30 when he was 27. And he started with me at, just when he turned 17. And this kid came from lower income. He had a stutter, did not dress very well at all. And then he was like on the front of, he was in Forbes and he looked like he was in a GQ magazine, a decade later. And just seeing this transformation, I'm sure you're familiar with DocuSign for signing docu. Like, he helped
Yeah.
company, back in the day.
Wow.
He has a huge private equity firm now, and he's got a huge nonprofit worth millions, and has a heart of gold, and I think about, wow, like, there's so many stories I could tell, and watching people go from, because for me, I love seeing people tap into their potential and really seeing, like, how instead of just being on this hamster wheel or reacting to whatever life gives us, showing them like, hey, you can have anything you want. You just have to take time to really think about, what do you want, and get clear on that.
Yes.
And then figure out how you're going to, and if you can't figure it out, hire someone, find a coach, find a group, find a mastermind, find someone that can help you really get the plan together, right?
Yeah.
So that you know what it is that you need to do, but then it's up to you to have the commitment to execute the plan, right? And it's going to get tough sometimes, and life is going to happen. And there are going to be times where it feels like, oh, forget this, and you want to throw it out the window. I've seen people try to transition from W-2 to business owner and want to give up, right? And I said, hey, it's not easy. It's not easy. Just stay focused, stay disciplined, keep feeding your mind, and the rewards will come, right?
Yeah.
And too many people quit on themselves too easily. But it's just
Well,
been so cool to see that now.
well, you talk about just clarity, commitment. You talked about the different ways to build and grow a business and become an owner versus an operator. But talk a little bit more just so the book Life as a Masterpiece, which you kind of hit on a little bit there. But what else within the book? Like I guess what does that mean if you haven't hit on it, or what would you add to that?
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, the book is real simple. I mean, the first third is what do you want and why, and it gets into the nitty gritty. There's a lot of cool, like pause and reflect that get you just thinking about life again. I think a lot of times parts of us as we grow older, or for adults, a lot of adults, parts of them die inside, and like the dreaming dies inside, and the possibilities, and so it's kind of reigniting those things. And the second part of the book is all about how do you get it, the nuts and bolts, and that's what I do for work, right? It's a strategy behind it. And then the last word is how do you sustain it? Because life happens. And so from daily practices for yourself, right? Daily rituals, overcoming adversity, studying stories of success, and really understanding that when we go through tough times, we're not the only ones. And the most successful people, they didn't get there in a straight line. All right. But they always got back up and they kept going. And I
Yeah.
think that being able to study those stories of resilience for anyone out there that as you're going to scale or you're going after something and you might feel stuck, something like that's okay. We all go through it.
Yeah.
But we have the tools and resources that we need, the know-how and the community to keep moving forward, right? And
Yeah.
get to where we want to go.
Love that. Love that. No, figure out what you want and why, how to get it, how to sustain it. So check out the book Life as a Masterpiece. Um, I want to ask you, Cathy, just to kind of close out, if you step back and reflect what you've done, how does what you do, how does it make you feel?
Oh, it's so fulfilling. Like I just early on, that was a big thing for me was time and money freedom, getting a chance to achieve that by my, late 20s and then being able to share that with so many others. It is so awesome to get to watch, you know, business owners playing with their kids, going to events during the day, while still having their business and not just surviving, but thriving. One of the
Yeah.
guys I coach in Northern California, he's like, he has 4 kids. He coaches all his kids' sports teams, and his business just keeps growing and growing because of the right teams and systems. And so
Yeah.
it's so fulfilling.
And I think that there's a little bit of a misperception of, you doing this and becoming an owner versus an operator. But then how do you do that? But when the way you said it, I love so much is you connect that to, but your company is a vehicle for others too. And you really have to set it up that way, not think about it that way. You have to set it up that way and enable your employees to make your company what they want it to be within what they do.
Yeah.
So much I love about that. Looking ahead, just what do you think is going to be the most important factor or key to your success moving forward?
I think just in the era that we're going into now and with all the AI and all the different tools, I think relationship building and the power of just connection with your people is the most important thing. We've been virtual for a while where now I'm very intentional this year with our business. I want to do more things in person, have more activities, get the team together because people are craving for that physical connection with others. So I
Yeah.
think that even as we have more robots, more flexibility, more, people working virtually, maybe all over the world, right? There's people that live in Puerto Rico half the year. Are we being intentional certain times of the year to have things where we come together
Yeah.
as like where you can give a hug, give a high five, because there's just such a power in physically being able to be connected. So that's a big focus for us now, getting back to that in our business.
Yeah, I love how you just people are craving it. And look, we talk about AI, but that's not going to replace relationships. Relationships and the importance of relationships and connections and network is not going anywhere. It's going to
Human
be
beings are wired for connection.
yes,
So that
yes.
is so
And
important.
I think we learned that we learned that over the last 5 years, right? So, what just book recommendation? What is the most impactful book that you've read?
Well, when I was younger, it was Maximum Achievement by Brian Tracy. And I think for anyone looking to up-level their mindset, emotional intelligence, there are so many incredible tools, one of my favorites of all time. And now I would say for me, it's been learning to surrender. So letting go and like living like untethered soul. Michael Singer's books have
Yeah,
been amazing for me. And that's just the season I'm in now is like, I just need to let go and, because I've been just so in the mix for so long. And so that's what I'm reading now. But back then it was Maximum Achievement. Highly recommend that. It's an oldie but a goodie by Brian Tracy. And now it's been a lot more about connecting and internally being grounded and being able to operate from this enlightened space,
Yep.
and go
I,
slower to go faster.
I chuckle because it's like just the evolution of the entrepreneur, right? It's like you go from this, you know, the name max achievement to then like surrender and untethered, and like just the evolution of the books we read and what we're studying and stuff is so interesting. But I think a lot of times, as I said earlier, you have to go through that process sometimes to figure out and get to the point that you're at, right? And if we can accelerate that and expedite that and help people do that, so they figure themselves out and this thing we call life, if they can figure that stuff out earlier, hopefully we can help people out with that. So Cathy, you've been very helpful for sure. We very much appreciate it. How can people find out more about you?
Best way is probably cathychristen.com. So Cathy with a C, and then Christen is like the name Chris, CHRIS, and then the number 10, TEN.com. So that has links to all my socials, to GoBundance, to my book, everything is on there.
Cathy, this has been great. Clarity on what you want, building your business, all the details you talked about that, whether it's building the team, building the system, setting goals. So much value. I appreciate it so much. Cathy, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for listening to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Moeller Real Estate, visit our website at www.moellerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.